there, this is Ananya, and today's topic is on exception handling in Python, and probably one of the last topics we'll be learning in the series of OOP in Python. Pretty exciting, right? We've come a long way. Now, have you ever been fed up with solving errors? And you've almost, come to the extent that you feel like giving up on the code and just stop programming? Well, all the beginners, including myself, have once or the one or the other time felt like this. Trust me, it's very natural. Now, well, what if, how to pre-handle a lot of these errors so that even if an error occurs, you get notified with a clear message as to what the error is? Well, today we will be doing exactly that. Now, Python throws two types of errors, that is syntax errors and exceptions. Let's first see what are syntax errors. Let's say I'm just giving a random divide formula that says 2 divided by 3, and by mistake I end up giving 2 brackets or rather say closing brackets instead of 1. Now, if you're on a text editor such as Sublime, you will automatically see this highlighted for you. But what if you were, let's say, on Idle or maybe some other text editor? Would you get to know then too? Well, now when I run this, you see this error coming up. Let's read what it says. The syntax error reads as invalid syntax. So whenever you are not following or somehow end up with the wrong syntax in Python or any other language, you end up getting a syntax error. Now, what is an exception? Now, exceptions basically occur during runtime. Now, what is runtime? That's when the code is being executed and the output is being shown to you automatically, like simultaneously rather. That is known as runtime. When you have executed your code and you can see the output and some error occurs, that is runtime error. Now, what I'm doing is 2 divided by 0. Now, in normal mathematics, when we are actually solving it on pen and paper, it basically turns out to be infinity, right? But in the computer world, it's not exactly the same. Now, yes, there is an error, but what is the error? It gives you 0 division error. And it reads division by 0. It's basically not allowed in this world, okay? So, whenever you have such exceptions, wherein all your syntaxes are correct, you are logically correct that yes, you're dividing a number by another number. But the only thing is 0 division is not allowed. So this was about syntactical errors and exceptions. Now let's come to how we can resolve these. There are pretty lot of ways to do it, and the first two that I want to show you all is raise and assert. So raising an exception is basically you are throwing the error, or rather say you're just printing it on the screen for the user. Now let's say you're playing the guessing number game and the user is supposed to guess a number from 1 to 0. So I'm just going to take an input saying num is equal to input of enter a number between 1 to 10, okay? And now what I do is, using the raise keyword, firstly I'll check the condition. So if num is less than 0, or rather say less than 1, or num is greater than, let's say, 10, right? It's supposed to be 10. Then I'm going to raise an error saying the exception is, let's say, please enter a number. Let me just copy the same thing. So we're just telling the user to be within the range provided. And now let's run it. And you know that on Sublime, we need to take this other way around to run input programs. So let's say I am entering 24. What happens? And there you go. The exception has been raised saying please enter a number between 1 to 10. Pretty simple, right? But now what if I want to make it a little more shorter? Or rather say this is a 2-line code. I want to make it into 1 line. Is that possible? Well, absolutely it is. What are you going to use? Instead of raise, you're going to say assert. Okay, the keyword assert. So what it does is, let me just copy this thing and I'll remove the if condition now. Okay, so I'm removing if and let me get this back. And I shall say assert. Okay, just a moment. Yeah. Okay, so I shall say assert. Now what is assert? If some condition is false, then throw or rather say print the error statement. So assert, now let me copy this line, Control V, right? And now separate these two with a comma. Now what is the problem with this? Int input, okay, there's a bracket missing. There you go, syntax errors, you know. So assert num is less than 1 and num is greater than 10. So it should be the correct, okay, the correct value. That is, if num is, let's say, less than 11, okay, this should be the true statement. And this, if this turns out to be false, this is printed. So if num is less than 11 and greater than 0, right, then remove this exception method and just give your print statement. That's it. So assert your true statement and then the statement that you want to print if this turns out to be false. Let's run this again. Let's go to tools. Let me close this. All right. Now Python run current file. Now let's say I'm giving 2. Okay, there's no issue. So it closes the program. Now if I run that again, let's see, let us give a wrong input. Let's say I was 45. And there you go, you have an assertion error saying, please enter a number between 1 to 10. Now, all of this is pretty clear, I suppose. Now, let's move forward to try and accept, okay? What is try and what is accept? So what you basically have to do is, you have a try block and an accept block. So what the try block does is, basically you want to check if a certain code, amount of code, has some errors in it. If it does, then it'll execute the accept block. Otherwise, it'll just move on. Okay. Now let's say I am just printing a random number and I'm giving an exception. Now what does the exception read? You probably use the variable before declaration. Now you probably might have noticed this. I'm telling it to print num, whereas previously nowhere have I declared the value of num. It's nowhere present. So this is basically something like forward referencing. That is, you are using a variable before declaring it. And hence, I get this exception. So in the try block, you try the code. And in the accept block, you give the error, right? So accept gets executed only when try proves to be false. Now let's run this. And there you go. You probably use the variable before declaration, right? You got the error for you. All right, here's another example for you, just to make your concepts clearer and clearer. I have a list that ranges from 1 to 5. Now what I'm doing is, let's say I do not know the number of values inside the list. And just randomly, I say try. And for I in range, a certain range, I keep printing the values of the list. I do not know how much it is. And then I say accept. Now there are various built-in exceptions provided to you, such as index error is one of them. So what is index error? For example, you go out of range, then it'll throw you this index exception. And then you can give it a pseudo name, that is IE, using the as keyword. So accept index error as IE, and then you just print IE. So what IE will basically do for you, it will give you the print statement of the error. Now let's run this, you all will understand what I mean. Now if you notice, there are only 5 elements and I'm going from 0 to 6. Okay, 7 because I'm stopping at 6. And there you go. It did give us all the numbers from 1 to 5, but it also threw us the inbuilt exception, that is list index out of range. Pretty simple, right? Now there are various exceptions like this. Now everything cannot be covered at once, and your head will go bonkers if I actually sit telling all about everything. And so I just chose quite a few, and we'll go about that. All right, now let's see another one. This exception is name error. You just saw this code out here, right, where we were saying forward referencing, we use the variable before declaration. This is exactly it, only we are using the inbuilt one, that is name error. So we haven't defined or declared num, right? So now if I run it, you see the automatic error given to you, that is name num is not defined. Pretty simple and neat, right? Now let's say I wanted to throw multiple exceptions, like there is a probability of multiple exceptions occurring. Then what do I do? Let's say I have a number. Again, I'm saying print num without declaring num previously. And I'm also dividing the number itself by 0. So there are two possible errors, that is name error and zero division error. So what you do is you simply put them inside a tuple and give as error. Now you might think that I have two errors here. So why am I giving only one pseudonym? Because whenever multiple exceptions are being thrown, there is a possibility of such thing happening, then at most one error is selected, not both. Okay, at most one. And hence, since it's only one error being selected, that gets allotted into error, right? Now in this case, let's see what happens. We have actually both the errors occurring. Number has not been declared and there is also division 0 occurring. Let's run it and see. And there you go, it gave us only one name error exception. Now let's say I define num as some random number, and now if I run it, you see it does print 8 for us. That is, it overlooked the name error since it does not exist, but there is a 0 division error and hence it prints it, right? I really hope you're getting the concept of it, because it's not really that tough. Okay, now this being done, let's look at another example. We have all done our basic calculator as a beginner, right? But have we ever used exception handling there? You probably might have, but for those who did not, here is a look at it. For example, you take two inputs from the user for your calculation. I'm just taking it hard-coded as number 1 and number 2. Now what I'm doing is similar to my previous example. I am saying try print num1 and num2. Next, divide num1 by num2, and the exception is same, name error and 0 division error and all of that. But what is new here? That is else. Now what does else do? Else will be executed if there is no exception, right? So try, the code is run, the exception has been checked if there was any possibility of an error here. Turns out there is no error and hence the else block has been executed. Pretty simple, right? Now do you think there will be an error here? I don't think so. Well, let's run it. And there you go. We have the print statement and this answer print statement, right? So 7 and 8 and the division result is also there. Now what if the user enters the second number as 0? Then what happens? Yes, it prints the values for us, but it gives us division by 0 error. And hence you see, you can make your codes much more sophisticated and handle your exceptions pretty easily. Now let's see, I guess one last example for our session today, and then we'll be ending. Now this is another concept where you have try, except, else, and finally also. Now we understood what is try, we know what is except, we know what is else. Now what is finally? Finally, you can remember the keyword as that after all of this process, finally, I am going to execute the code inside my block without fail. Okay? Like no matter what happens up here, I will execute what is inside finally. So let us take the same calculator example and remember that after each operation, you ask the user if he or she wants to continue calculating. So what do? You put it inside a while loop and ask that, do you want to continue? So just for simplicity purpose, I'm only giving the print statement, all right? So no matter what happens in the previous operations, you don't bother about that. You only bother if the user wants to continue or not, so that will always be present. And hence, inside the finally block, you put, do you want to continue, right? So there you go. You, no matter what happens up there, you have, do you want to continue? Let's put an error up there and see if we get the finally block being executed. And here you go. Do you get an error? You have the finally block being executed. Now, in case you did not do all of this in your first calculator example, I really want you all to go back quickly and within 5 minutes make your code way more sophisticated. All right, so this is all about exception handling in Python. I hope you all understood. And here's the big news. I'm coming up with a project, a pretty interesting one, and there also I think I'll be using exception handling also, so please do visit that to all yes of try out the project and also get your concepts of exception handling clear. All right, bye bye, I'll see you all soon.